All right, welcome anybody and everybody. Today's a wonderful day. It's a snow day, so I didn't have to go into work. I got my scooping done. I got a workout in. I got to see my niece and nephew for a while. And before I chillax the rest of the day and just pig out, I figured I might as well get a little bit of brain power going, versus just working the muscles. And what better to study than the Bible? Thank the Lord. It sounds sarcastic because the Bible can be pretty boring, but I'm enjoying this a lot. By the way, if I ever get any followers, a lot of these pauses that I keep doing like that, it's not typical. I'm trying not to cuss really hard because of the fact that I'm studying the Bible. But let it be known, I really want to curse sometimes. Not out of anger, but it just explains the situation. Alright. Getting to Genesis 13. What a lucky number that is. So this is when Abram, he's not Abraham yet. He becomes Abraham. So right now it's just Abram. Or old Abe for short, I'm sure. And his nephew Lot part ways in this. So we know that they've left Egypt. The Pharaoh's mad at him because he told him that his sexy wife was his sister so that they wouldn't kill him because they're a pretty depraved society and he knew that they would do that. And I kind of had this back and forth, like, I don't believe that you should ever lie. At the same time, it shows shrewdness in knowing and being aware of the culture that he's going into. People just look at the lie, but they don't realize they would have killed him. His wife was super freaking hot, and that was their society. It was like, take what we want. And yeah, he should have probably had faith that God would have protected him either way. But I think more than likely, God had a plan. So in the last one, when he went into Egypt and he lied, it went back to God uses these other great civilizations to verify his glory. Even though they don't worship him, and the Israelites, the Jewish people, the ones that follow him, he'll use these other civilizations in important parts of history when they have grand civilizations like Egypt at the time so that his glory will be remembered. And what happens is Pharaoh brings on a plague upon him and all his household because he wanted to get with Sarah, basically. And, probably what that means is they couldn't get it, perform. They couldn't get it up. And a lot of other plagues. So it preluded Moses. The plagues preludes them and kind of foreshadows so that they will be aware when Moses comes and these plagues come. They'll be like, this is the God of Abraham, this is the God of Moses. We were told about this a while ago. Extra scary sort of thing. And it extra verifies using these extra civilizations. Or other, I shouldn't call them extra civilizations. So they leave. By this time, we'll just get into it. So Genesis 13, 1 through 2. And Abram went up out of Egypt, he and his wife and all that he had, and Lot with him, into the south. And Abram was very rich in cattle and silver and gold. So they leave Egypt after the plagues. They're both rich. So he's got his hot wife and he's got a lot of money. So this guy's doing all right. Doesn't have any kids yet, though. But God told him that his seed would basically be innumerable. It'd be so huge, and they'd be blessings, and they'd be a priesthood unto the world. Obviously, as we know, where we know Christ comes from and everything. But also realize he's rich. Now, a lot of people think that kind of the way that it's worded, possibly Pharaoh gave him being Lot, a lot of money and possessions and things like that. And he might have, but they'll make reference to when Pharaoh wanted favor with Abram and treated him, doesn't even say good, just entreated him is what it says. And then right after that, it basically, and he had a lot of cattle, blah, blah, blah. And people think this means Pharaoh gave him cattle. Maybe. I tend to think that by Pharaoh entreating him, it just means that he didn't take his stuff. Because it doesn't say Pharaoh gave it to him. It just says that he treated him well and that he had all this stuff. And we learned earlier when they leave Mesopotamia area, leave the area of Haran, in the city of Ur and all that, that they have a lot of possessions and maidservants and manservants and all this stuff. So he's been blessed, and we'll see why later on. He's very shrewd, a good business person, but it's because he's taking care of people. So then it goes back to, you will be a blessing to others if you're blessed. If you're blessed, you will be a blessing to others. So he's taking care of all these people, so they will have loyalty to him. He's got a lot of following. Everybody kind of brings their own sort of thing in, and he kind of creates his own little society, which ends up becoming Israel. And Lot's with him still. So verse 3, and he went on his journeys from the south, even to Bethel, unto the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Hai. Now, if you want to get into like these locations, I kind of do. I look them up. I just don't find it that necessary. I'm trying to download software right now so that I can capture stuff on my screen, but I'm still learning how to use it. So maybe, by Exodus, I'll be using maps. But just know, like, these places, we still know where they're at today. And they're just describing the area to us. Verse 4, unto the place of the altar which he had made there at first, and there Abram called on the name of the Lord. So he goes basically back to where he started his journey when he left the land of Haran. And he goes to the altar and he prays again. And he's probably thanking God for keeping him alive in the land of Egypt, for everyone being spared. He saw the plagues that he brought upon the Pharaoh, so he knows that he's being taken care of. And you think about this later on when the Israelites are traveling through the desert for 40 years or whatnot, or then they're traveling to the Holy Land, and how they're constantly complaining, and they're like, well, this is so awful. But look at the example of their forefather, Abram here. He's going through struggle. He's having to be nomadic, and God just told him that his seed would spread throughout the world, and this whole land is his, and to go get to know it. But he doesn't have any kids yet, and the land is occupied by these tough people. I mean, believe what you will, whether about them being the Nephilim or giants, or whether them being just a warrior culture. Either way, it doesn't have an easy path ahead of him. He just got kicked out of Egypt because his wife was super hot, and they all wanted to bang her, but God wouldn't let him do it. So he could have been bitching and moaning to... See, there, I just cursed. He could have been complaining the whole time to God, but instead he's praying and he's thanking him. He's showing the gratitude because God has blessed him, and he's able to see that. Moving on to verse 5. And Lot also, which went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents. So Abram's rich in his own right. And more than likely, he's also winning souls. So it's mentioned, like I said, in the last one where they... not the last chapter. So it would have been back in chapter 11 when they first left. No, it is in chapter 12. It talks about Abram bringing souls with him. So you got to understand the Old Testament, when these patriarchs are discoursing with God, it's Christ. Christ is the one that they are speaking with. This is the one that they are making their covenant with, and all this, because Christ is the Word and Christ is truth. That's why they are able to prophesy about him all the time, because it's him. So they are spreading Christ's message even before Christ was here. And this is why, the patriarchs knew of Christ. They knew his message. He'd come and told it to them. The Spirit of Christ, the Spirit of is the spirit of prophecy. It's the spirit of truth. They were, both Lot and Abram were preaching Christ's word. It's not the original people, but they kind of were at this time, because Noah and Shem are getting old, about to die, and almost everyone else in the land is just kind of losing their way, basically. Now, that being said, there were still those small pockets, but they were never people who were going to come to much or become much glory, but people who remembered it from their forefathers or understood it. We can all be saved through the Spirit of Christ, and Christ obviously hadn't come and died for our sins yet, But that didn't mean that people couldn't have felt the desire for truth in their heart and justice and righteousness and been like, well, I don't believe in these gods that everyone's telling me about, but I do believe that if there is a God, he must be true and he must be righteous and loving and just, and they will come to understand Christ. I go all the time to a friend of mine in the Navy who came here from China. She flat out told me about how she'd had a dream. Like, Christianity basically is punishable there, and it's unacceptable, and she'd never really heard anything about it. And when I asked her about her faith and everything, she told me she had a dream when she was a teenager about Jesus. She didn't even know who Jesus was, and to look into it and to find him. And I was like, what in the world? The Spirit of Christ. That's why it goes. I watched my Bloodline video that is going up, I think, earlier today. The Spirit of Christ can come to people. You know, he makes a covenant with Abram's line. You know, Abraham's line becomes important because they're the ones who are meant to carry the message. Now, they aren't saved because of their blood, but they are destined to be priests. And God is ordained and will over them so that their society will succeed in carrying his message, so that it won't be just so hard for people to, have to decide on their own. When you have people spreading the news with backed up scripture and everything, it's much easier. Man, I got way off topic there. I'm so sorry. But just remember, Lot's rich in his own right, and they're saving souls. They're spreading the message of Christ, even though Christ hasn't come yet. You know, it's not the full message as of yet necessarily, because they don't know all the prophecies yet, and they don't necessarily know that, Christ is going to be crucified. But they're spreading the message of God and his salvation for those who choose to follow his ways, which is exactly what Christ brings. Now, in the end, if you accept Christ, you're saved. But if you accept Christ, you accept truth. You accept justice, righteousness, and loving nature. That is accepting Christ. In verse 6, and the land was not able to bear them, that they might dwell together. For their substance was great, so they could not dwell together. So they're getting crowded. They both have a lot of people in their own following. They're kind of their own patriarchs, because Lot is his nephew, so he's kind of like the head of his own household sort of thing. And basically they're living too close together is all that's going on, because they're uncle and nephew, and they both obviously believe in God, and they're loving guys, and they're good guys, and they want to probably see each other every day, but they're getting too big a following, too many people relying on them. And, people aren't going to always get along, even if they're good people. And it's not only that, it could just be, well, here, I'll show you. It gets right into it. And there was a strife between the herdsmen of Abram's cattle and a strife between the herdsmen of Lot's cattle. And the Canaanite and Perizzite dwelled in the land. So what they're saying is the land's already crowded. They're saying the Canaanites and the Perizzites. Remember, the Canaanites, the cursed ones. Perizzites end up not being too fond of them either. So these people are presenting a danger, and more occupants of this land that are using up the herds and everything. And also the herdsmen are, it's not meant to say that they're bad people, but they're doing their job. And it's annoying and complicated before fences when your sheep would go here, your cattle would go there, and that's my cattle. No, I'm pretty sure that's mine. Well, hey, I have to keep count. I have to watch over Abram's cattle, and well, I got to watch over Lot's cattle, okay? And I'm telling you that one with the spot is ours. Well, I don't think so, because we're supposed to have 90. So they're going to start arguing. It's just the way it is. It doesn't mean anyone's bad. So their land is getting kind of crowded where they're all hanging out at. And Abram said unto Lot, let there be no strife, I pray thee, between me and thee, and between my herdsmen and thy herdsmen, for we be brethren. Remember, Lot is Abram's nephew. Verse 9, is not the whole land before thee? Separate thyself, I pray thee, for me. If thou wilt take the left hand, then I will go to the right. Or if thou depart to the right hand, then I will go to the left. This is where that whole the left-hand path, right-hand path kind of originates. I mean, it originates with Cain and Abel, but that's a lot more lore, not canonical. This is kind of more canonical. But I'm not one of those weirdos who like left-handed people or the devil or the wrong or something wrong with it. You know, I try to be ambidextrous every day, but it's basically it's just a colloquialism. You know, taking the left-hand path is kind of taking the broad path, the easy path, or whatever. And verse 10, and Lot lifted up his eyes and beheld. So what do we got here? Abram's making him an offer. Like, hey, there's no reason for strife between us. You know, God promised this land to me, basically, but you pick which way you want to go. You want to go that way, you want to go that way. We'll separate ourselves. Know that, you know, I always love you, and I don't want there to be strife between us due to petty little things like this. Let's just kind of go our own way. And he lets Lot make the choice. So here we go again, verse 10. And Lot lifted up his eyes and beheld all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere, before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, that is, even as the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as thou comest unto Zoar. So basically the land is an oasis. That he's kind of like, oh, you're giving me an option here. And he looks this one way, and it just looks lush and beautiful, you know. And of course, this is before Sodom and Gomorrah are destroyed, which kind of destroys the land too. But Lot decides to go that way. It's not meant, because Lot, trust me, he ends up being a patriarch. He's a true believer in everything. He's not a bad guy whatsoever. I mean, it's just the obvious answer, but it's kind of a parable at the same time. You know, what seems like immediate gratification or what is pleasurable to the eyes, you know, or what's going to give you instant satisfaction. You know, things aren't always what they appear, basically. You know, Abram's path looked harder, like he would have a harder time feeding his and everything. Well, we know what ends up happening. You know, we'll get into it. But Sodom and Gomorrah and the whole land ends up getting wiped out. It's not quite the same thing for Abram. All right. Moving on, verse 11. Then Lot chose him all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated themselves the one from the other. Yeah, they made a good choice in my opinion. I mean, it's obviously long term we see, you know, but hindsight's 20/20. You're just like, hey, this is gonna be the better one. And you could say he could have been polite and like, no, I'll go this way. No. Why would you do that in this instance? You're the younger anyway. You know, your elder is offering you this nice thing. Verse 12. Abram dwelled in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelled in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tent towards Sodom. But the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly. All right. So both men go to dangerous areas because Abram's going to have to deal with the Canaanites in the Holy Land. Lot's dealing with these. Sodom and Gomorrah it's basically been established. They were capitals, you know, city-states unto themselves, the cities of the plain. And debauchery galore. And, you know, this isn't like debauchery Vegas style, which is debauchery in and of itself. You know, but we in America kind of like, oh, the prudes. That's not at all what's going on. They're wicked. They are sinners before. They were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly. Like, look into it. There's even archaeological evidence and everything that supports this. They were bad people. Now you can make an argument that these were the Nephilim come back after Noah's ark. You know, somehow they made their resurgence. This could be some more of the Canaanites and the cursed line of Canaan. You can just say that they're terrible people. Maybe it's all of the above. These are the different theories. All we know is these were great cities where sin abound. And I'm not talking normal level sin. All sin's bad. This is like bestiality, necrophilia, rape, everywhere. Talk about a rape culture. It was literally the culture that if you had more power or prestige or in any way above the class of this people, you could do whatever you wanted to them. You could just walk up to them and, it's so hard not to curse. You could just walk up to them and bend them over, and they had to accept it. And then kill them afterwards if you wanted to. Why not? Because that's their god. Their gods asked for blood sacrifice. And then you drink the blood. And then you have sex in the blood. And then you have sex with an animal. And, then you eat the people that you just killed. You got to watch the Professor Brothers do a Bible study. Look it up. Professor Brothers Bible study. It's a little cartoon story thing. It talks about Sodom and Gomorrah. He's like, they're basically having sex with everything they could find. Rocks. They're even eating poo-poo. In fact, they couldn't even get off without a little bit of caca in their mouth, And that's what's going on. All right, Sodom and Gomorrah, this isn't even the story we're getting into. But you have to understand, they were doing every sin you can think of. And not only that, it's that these things were what was virtuous. That was their culture. It was virtuous to slaughter babies, to sacrifice for your God, and then have sex in the blood and all this stuff. Because that's the God they're worshiping. So it's virtuous to worship God, That is a totally different society that you can't even comprehend. This is why they had to be wiped out. Not only because they were sinning, and I believe the Bible, and that not only were they sinning, but whatever, I'm just going to do it. Shit started happening. Okay, like bad stuff, like black magic things. But even if you don't believe that, which I do, that's why I think that it would have affected their minds so much, because they saw this dark magic happening, but to them it was giving them power. So they would always believe their religion was a true thing because they saw this crazy stuff. It's kind of like in Game of Thrones when Khaleesi hears the spirits, or they can hear the spirits speaking when Khaleesi's giving birth, to her son and stuff. People would hear stuff like, so this is real. Something real is going on here. I might be scared of it, but I'm going to do what the high priest tells me those crazy noises told them to do, Crazy stuff. But even if you don't believe that, you have to believe in the things we can prove, which are, well, I mean, I guess proving's hard, but most archaeological evidence supports that this is what was going on. That's disease central. That is so much disease. Okay, if you're performing sodomy before antiseptics on a regular basis, and then you top that with probably being bisexual because it's just sex with everybody, plus bestiality, plus necrophilia, plus doing it in blood, plus sacrifice, and no soap again. Everyone, every animal, everything has diseases. That's what's going on. Pedophilia. There was no pedophilia. What are you talking about? Babies, kids, whatever. Like, this was every type of just debauchery, and it was seen as virtuous by them. They were sinning before the Lord exceedingly. I've said it before, I'll say it again. The Bible is very subtle about these things because they don't want to talk about this dark, gross stuff. Which, of course, that's not what you want when you're talking about God, is to bring up these things. But you do, especially as a grown man, you need to be aware of this stuff. Because there's going to be so many D-bags who try to attack the Bible. And if you don't understand the truth and nature of things, you'll quickly crumble under their arguments. How easy, God is an evil God of the Old Testament. Look at the things he was doing. That's pretty justified, really, Verse 14 through 15. And the Lord said unto Abram, after that Lot was separated from him, lift up now thine eyes, and look from the place where thou art northward, and southward, and eastward, and westward. Verse 15 now. For all the land which thou seest, to thee will I give it, and to thee seed forever. So I wonder, if Lot had taken that way, would Abram have been given the land of the plain, the cities of the plain? I mean, obviously, God knows what's going to happen, so he knew which way Lot was going to go and all that jazz. But interesting to think about. I mean, obviously, this is always what God was going to give him. But just one of those things. And basically, he says, land, he wants him to walk the land. More than likely, what I think of here is get to know the place that I'm sending you. Yeah. Look thou northward and southward and eastward and westward, for all the land that thou seest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed forever. So forever your line owns this land. Now, obviously, secularists and people will make an argument this isn't, they don't actually have a claim to the land. Who knows? That's debates for smarter and probably more money-grubbing type of people than I am. Slick politician types. But this is a pretty old scripture here. And Abraham, even if you don't believe in God, he does take possession of the land, he and his descendants, through conquest. I mean, first here, Abram takes the land through conquest. And then eventually when it comes to Jacob and Joseph, they go back to Egypt and they stay there until Moses brings them back. And then through succession of Moses all the way down to finally Saul and David, they conquer the land again. So twice now they do have conquest right to the land as far as the peoples go. And that's really the only way land is ever taken. Anyone says that this land belongs to these peoples because they were the first ones here. Usually those people aren't even the first ones there. They took it from the people they found there. Even with Native American history. And I could, dude, I love Native American history. I'm not downplaying it. But one tribe was wiped out completely by another tribe that then came in and wiped that tribe out. So it's never like they were the original settlers. Everyone conquered the land by conquest. But God, because I believe the Bible to be historical fact, God told Abram he would have this forever. And shockingly, they still have it today. Now you can say, oh, that's because of this, because of that. Yeah, but it doesn't change the fact that thousands of years ago they said it, and it's still accurate. Verse 16, and I will make thy seed as the dust of the earth, so that if a man can number the dust of the earth, then shall thy seed also be numbered. I mean, what is he thinking there? Like, sweet! Basically, you're going to be the greatest patriarch of the world. This land of milk and honey is yours, and you're going to have all kinds of lineages and everybody's going to come from you. It's going to be just wonderful. Now we know that basically this ends in Christ. And now we also know, let's read that one more time. Yeah, so his seed is going to become so numerous, and they're going to spread all throughout the earth. And when they spread, they're going to take the message with them to the earth. Like before Christ even came and brought the message to the Gentiles, it was already, like I said, they were already saving souls with the message of Christ. And that is not blasphemy. That's not saying that you can't be saved without Christ, because you're still being saved. Christ is eternal. He's always been and always will be. He was here in earthly flesh form at once to die for our sins, and that's important to know and accept now after it's happened, and many people knew it ahead of time, but they were doing that from the beginning, even before Christ. This is so amazing. They were spreading the message of Christ before Christ even came throughout the world. Why do you think the wise men of the East knew what the heck was going on when there was a star above them? Like, they weren't Israelites. I mean, they might have been descendants of Abraham, probably, who knows. But they weren't from the land. It'd be thousands of years. The message spread. People knew this message because of Genesis 13:16. All right. Verse 17, arise, walk through the land in the length of it and in the breadth of it, for I will give it unto thee. So yeah, basically, or I say basically way too much. I think he's telling him to make a map. That's the way I always say it. Get to know the land. You know, a king should know his land. A ruler should know his land. Abram's not meant to necessarily be a king, but he's going to be a father of a nation. And, you know, you buy a farm, anything like that. You go and you drive your four-wheeler around the land. You get to know the area real well because it's yours. You know, you got to take care of it and you got to know it. So take care of it. All right, and then here we go. Verse 18. Then Abram removed his tent and came and dwelt in the plain of Mamre, which is in Hebron, and built there an altar unto the Lord. Another altar, probably prayed again. I just want to one more time go back to a few points in this. You know, the gist of it is Lot and him separate. Remember, both of them have kind of their own money and their own manservants and cattle and stuff. Lot goes near Sodom and Gomorrah in the plains with the cities. Abram goes to basically Israel, and God tells him he gets all this, told to go walk it and take care of it. So Lot and Abram separate and they go to their own ways, and that's kind of what the story says. But this is also where he's promised once again. I mean, keeps getting promises made to him, but they're the same one. And this is right here. He's promised the land. And he's promised his seed will spread throughout the world. He's already been told that his descendants will be a blessing to the world and they will be blessed and all this stuff. But now he's being told that they're going to be innumerous. Remember, and then he builds an altar to God where he prays and keeps calling on the name of the God. He called on the name of God when he left Egypt. Went back to his altar. He's praying and worshiping and showing gratitude. Think about this in your own life. Abram gets kicked out of Egypt. I already went over all this stuff in the beginning. And then he prays to God. Here, God, again, without really giving him anything to show, to be like for certain, again tells him this land is yours. Even though it's inhabited by the descendants of Canaan, the cursed Canaan, Ham's descendant, who probably want to kill him. Because once they got the curse, I'm not going to get into detail on all that, but they knew that even if they weren't bad people, they might be looked at as bad people, I guess. But anyway, they're not nice. Their culture is just a warrior type culture. The Canaanites, just like the people of Sodom and Gomorrah, do sacrifice and sexual rituals and all kinds of just depraved stuff. And he's got to go battle with them, probably, to take this land that God gives him. And then he's also told again about all his descendants that he'd have and all this great stuff. But he knows that the patriarchs keep living shorter lives. He's pretty old already. His wife's getting kind of old. He doesn't have any kids yet. There's so many reasons he should have and could have doubted the Lord. What do you mean you're going to give me a bunch of descendants? I don't have any kids yet. I'm an old man already. What are you talking about? I got kicked out of Egypt, and now you're telling me that this land is mine and go walk around it and get to know it? There's tribes of giants. I mean, believe what you will, but that's what they believe. That's what they saw. That rule this land. Like, this is a bunch of bullcrap. I mean, how hard? This isn't going to be an easy thing. Like, you're telling me it's mine, but I still got to go take it. But he doesn't. He doesn't do any of that. He hears the Lord's message, and he thanks him and gives praise, and he prays for guidance and continued support, and continues to worship the Lord. It's so easy to look at all the negatives that are going on. It's so easy. There's so many of them. But at the same time, you have to look at the blessings. And I see that in every story of the Bible. Honestly, that's what I see all the time. And right here, it really stands out to me. That Abram, and it makes sense why God gets so annoyed by the Israelites, I feel like. Because he's like, what the frick are you guys doing in Exodus when you're just wandering around and complaining the whole time? Do you not know your own people's story? Look what Abram had to go through. He had faith the whole time, and look how... And he was blessed. I feel like that's probably why God got so extra annoyed. He's like, they not even know? their own stories. Alright, so that's chapter 13. Hope everyone enjoyed it. God bless, and have a wonderful good morning, afternoon, evening, or good night.